One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Have you heard of the 5 love languages? Right? It's Gary Chapman, he has the book, The 5 Love Languages, and we hear people talk about them all the time. Let me see if I can do this off the top of my head. It's personal touch, quality time, gifts, acts of service, and words of affirmation. Ooh, I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. I did that off the top of my head. But if there was a love language that I spoke fluently that had to do with having an online business, it would 100% be marketing and podcasting. I know it's not a thing, but I'm making it a thing right now. As I'm talking to you, I'm actively making my love languages of running an online business be marketing and podcasting, because these are the things that I absolutely love to talk about. Trust me, there's other aspects of having an online business that I'm like, oh my gosh, I never want to deal with that stuff, even though we do it, right? We do it because we want to have an online business, even though some of the things drive me crazy. But marketing, y'all, give it to me every day. I mean, when you read books about marketing and you tell other people, I have, my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law, they are avid readers, but they love fiction. They love some fiction books and they consume them. They're always, swapping books. They're like, oh, I finished this one. Have you read that one? And they're always talking about all these books that I don't know about. But for me, I love to nerd out on business books and marketing books. And they make my heart so happy. So today I want to give you some tips on branding strategies for your podcast and how you can move forward knowing that you are putting really smart marketing tactics in place that will help your podcast reach more people. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? The reason why I wanted to create this episode today is specifically because I was asked to participate, and this is like really fun because this is actually happening today, like when this episode releases, which is fun, which it's always kind of weird. Like, let me just say that when you know the air date of an episode is coming and you want to talk about something in future tense, but I'm actually recording it about a week before this episode airs. Anyway, just letting you know, it's kind of a funky thing when you know that things are happening when the episode goes live, but haven't actually happened yet. So we're kind of future pacing this episode. But today, on the day that this episode goes live, I'm actually participating on a panel for Podcast Movement University. Yes, hallelujah. My vision board for 2019 is finally complete. This was the one last thing lingering on my vision board. It was speaking and being a part of podcast movement in some capacity. And so today I'm speaking on a panel with some other ladies that are part of ASA Collective. So you can go into the show notes. I'm going to link to the episode that I did with one of the ASA ladies last year, and it was so good. Oh my gosh, it was so good because we were talking about podcast networks and how they work and all the things. And it's really important to understand this, especially whenever you want to look at podcast advertising. I know y'all want to know about podcast sponsorship, podcast advertising. How does this work? Well, podcast networks are just as important to understand. And ASA is a fantastic collaborative environment for female podcasters. And Marla, she's the founder, she reached out to me and was like, hey, I would love for you to come and talk about podcast marketing on this panel that we're having. Do you have any ideas of what you would specifically want to talk about? And I was like, branding. Yes, like this is my thing. So last year, or actually it might have been in 2019, I participated in ASA, that's OSSA, ASA. They asked me to help them develop this free e-course for podcasters. It was how to get started. And they actually asked many people, many podcasters in the ASA community to contribute in their expertise. And so I actually delivered the branding module for this e-course that they put together. And so it just felt right that I talk about branding at Podcast Movement University. And as me recording this, I actually haven't participated on the panel yet. So I don't know what's going to happen on that day, how it's all going to go down on the panel. I'm so dang excited about it because we're going to talk about podcast marketing and social media. We have social media experts coming to talk about how you can promote your show. But again, I wanted to stick to my lane of branding. If you've been around here, you know I'm not a social media expert. I do not claim to be. I don't have hundreds of millions of followers. I don't have any of that. But what I know is my roots, everything that is grounded in this entire journey is my degree in marketing and me really understanding and becoming obsessed with the customer journey, whether it is your audience and they're just listening to your podcast, or it's someone actually becoming a customer, a consumer of what you are creating. I know branding. I know how to create a consistent message all the way across the board. So I have 5 key points that I want to share with you today, and we're going to go deep into some of these, and some of these we're just going to touch on, but I want to make sure that you check out the show notes because I'm going to link to some other awesome episodes, some really cool YouTube videos that you can check out. And I want to make sure that you go to see those. If this is something you're struggling with, you're like, I really don't know how to market my show, I need help with this, then go to all the resources. So crystalprofit.com/episode 236 is where you're going to find everything that we talk about here today. But let's start with the 5 things that we're going to talk about. So first and foremost, consistency. I feel like a broken record, but I'm going to say it again and I'm going to keep saying it. consistency is so, so important. So how often are you showing up for your audience? Why does this matter, right? We ask this question all the time, but why does this actually matter? The reason why consistency matters is because if I do not see your podcast on a regular basis, how am I going to know that it's there? Because I don't know about you, as a consumer of podcast, I am not scrolling like the main Apple podcast feed just saying, oh my gosh, I wonder what's new in podcasting. I mean, maybe that happens every once in a while, but not every time I go. Like I have habitually worked in shows that I listen to all the time. Why? Why do I listen to these specific shows? Why do I listen to The Office Ladies on a regular basis? Because they put their podcast information out there. Not only just their podcast episode, they're posting on social media, and then the hosts are sharing across their stories. It's like it is out there that this is happening on a regular basis. So this is why consistency matters. And we're going to get into like the actual consistency of your brand, but I just want to reiterate consistency matters so people can see it's like a reminder. It's that constant reminder. It's like, oh, they put out a new episode. Oh, I noticed their font. They must have put out another episode, right? Like we all know we're scrolling on Instagram and then all of a sudden we see something and like it clicks like in our brain. It's the psychology of noticing colors and fonts and text that we're like, oh, that's that one podcast. They must have put out something new. So I know every time I see Dax Shepard's, like he has this yellow color for the Armchair Expert. Anytime I see those colors, my brain immediately goes to his podcast. Like even if it's not his stuff, even if it's just closely, remotely related, and I see that color, I'm like, oh wait, that's not Armchair Expert. That must be something else. But that's where my mind goes because I've seen it so often that it's habit. So this is why consistency matters. So you have to show up for your audience, right? Even if it's just as simple as just posting an episode every single week, because most people have notifications on their phone that say, oh, a new episode's out, right? Like we're all used to getting that ding that's like, hey, there's new podcast episodes to listen to. So that is a habit that can only be formed whenever you're consistent with your show. And you want to be known for that. Someone actually told me the other day, they're like, I so appreciate that you just keep showing up. Like, even if it's messy, even if it's not perfect, you just keep showing up. And I have established this reputation of being a consistent podcaster, being a consistent poster on my social media, being a consistent leader in what I'm doing because I just keep showing up. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nowhere have we once said you got to show up perfect. You got to have all your shiitake together. No, like we just keep showing up. That's what we do around here. That's what consistency is to me. And that's how I want you to adopt this idea of being consistent. Okay, the second part of consistency is your branding clear across all of your platforms? We're going to get into marketing in just a second, but I'm talking about if I go look, right? And this is, okay, hang on, before we get there, because that's really going to be the marketing idea. What I'm thinking of right now is this is where it gets complicated. Whenever you want to have consistency across everything, but you also want to start outsourcing pieces of your podcast or pieces of your business. Now, here's a great example. It gets complicated when you start outsourcing your social media or someone to write copy for your website or someone to write your weekly email newsletter. There are many entrepreneurs that want to start outsourcing all these pieces and they can't wait. They're like, oh, I can't wait until all I do is show up and create the podcast and then that's all I have to do. And I'm like, please, please, please don't start outsourcing things that matter and that carry your message, because things like I can tell real fast the people that I start following that begin to outsource things because it doesn't align anymore. I'm like, this is not their voice. They would have not have done it this way if they were actually the person doing it. So you want to be consistent with your voice, with your message across all of your platforms. Okay, so that's number one, consistency. Number two, marketing. I know, and I got a little antsy because I love to talk about marketing, but I'm just, okay, here we are. I should have put this as first so I could just get it all off my chest, but we're here. Okay, number two, marketing. So is it clear that you are the same person on Instagram as you are on Facebook and as you are on LinkedIn and as you are on YouTube and as you are in your email newsletter? Like, this is what I'm talking about, the consistency, because you have to make sure that your marketing is clear all across the board. So there's a lot of nuances that we can get into that, we could just talk about for hours when it comes to the way that your messaging is and the way that you are posting certain pictures and using the different kinds of fonts, like the actual branding strategies that are important behind this is going back to consistency. Now, with marketing, okay, this is one of the things that I actually learned from a blogging course that I took whenever I first got started. I'm so grateful that this was one of the assignments we had. It was like, okay, create a brand board, because believe it or not, even though I took all the marketing classes and I did all this, I was not creating, like I wasn't a graphic design communications major, right? Like I wasn't doing the designing, I was on the marketing side of like how to talk about a business and do all these things. So I didn't know that this was so important to the process of marketing. But I want you to actually go create a brand board. I feel like I've been giving more assignments lately in episodes, and this is a very important one. I think that you should create a brand board for your podcast that has your colors that you use, like whatever you have on your podcast artwork or whatever, colors you use for social media, all that, like just write them all down. Then the fonts that you use, maybe the styles, like if you're a Canva user and you use certain effects, write them down. What kind of videos are you using? Do you have templates? Do you have show notes? Like whatever you're currently doing that you like, your audience is responding to, write it all down and then create a simple brand board. You can do this in Canva. You could just do it in a Google Doc. You could write it down in a notebook, but you need to have all this information that you can reference at any time. Anytime you want to make sure your brand is matching what it's supposed to. So another way that I use this, and I know a lot of y'all are creating courses, you're creating memberships, you're doing a lot of things that are trying to support your podcast, like you're trying to support your members and also generate revenue. Well, what happens when you go create a sales page? You don't need to start from scratch. You already have your brand. You have your fonts that you use. You have your colors. You have the messaging that you want to make sure is very clear within your sales page to your podcast to whatever you do. So have this brand board and make it clear that this is what your brand board is, not only for you, but for anybody that you work with. Whether you hire an outside contractor or you bring on an employee to your team, it makes things so much easier. Y'all, I'm not even kidding. So much freaking easier when you can hand someone a link and you're like, hey, by the way, these are the only fonts that we use. These are the only, because I've worked with people that weren't necessarily graphic designers, but they were outside contractors. And they're like, oh, let me do it my way. And they create something and they bring it back to me. And I'm like, what is this? This isn't me. This has nothing to do with how we run things around here. But that was my fault. I didn't tell them, oh, by the way, here's your guidelines. Here's your parameters. Like you can get creative within this scope of work, but this is what you should use. This is your guiding post. This is your North Star. You got to use our brand board. Okay. And it just makes everything so much easier. You think, oh, I don't want to be restrictive. I want to let them, they're the creative person. I want them to be, no. You need to have this laid out. That way your brand is consistent, because I don't want you using scripty fonts for all your posts. And you're like, I really don't like that, but that's what that graphic design person created for me and they think it looks good. So no, You're giving away the power of marketing your podcast to your audience. Okay. So marketing is super, super important to your brand and how your audience sees your podcast. Whew, I feel like I'm getting on the high horse today about marketing. Okay, so we're going to keep going. The next one is messaging. And I feel like this is kind of like all of these stack on top of one another as the building blocks for branding your podcast. But message, this is number 3. What does your brand and your marketing say about you when you have nothing to say? Okay, this sounds kind of weird, but it's kind of like the question of what are people saying about you when you're not in the room? And by that, I mean when people see that you're posting things.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Is it clear that it's for them? Is it clear? Like, do you have to go and explain things? Because whenever I see something and it doesn't make sense to me, I just keep scrolling. I'm like, what the heck was that? Who was that for? It wasn't for me, so I just keep going. And I go back to, and if you haven't read this book, go grab it. Go grab it now. This needs to be at the top of your list. You need to go get the audio version. I guess there's an audio version. I'm sure there is because he does a lot of them. But Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. Go grab it. And I'm going to spoil it for you right here because the best message that you can get out of that book is if you confuse, you lose. So the message from your podcast to your email to your social media to whatever you're showing up online has to be clear. It has to be consistent. If you've been listening to this podcast, I bet I could ask you, what are the 3 things that we talk about on this show? And you're going to say, well, we talk about podcasting. I'm going to say, yes, that's right. True. Okay, slap in the face on that one. I get it. But we talk about how to start, launch, and market a podcast. That is what we do around here. If you've been listening for a while, you probably know that. And you probably know at the very end of this episode, I'm going to say, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. That is messaging. That is branding. When your people can come to you and say, oh, I know what your tagline is. Oh, I know what your show stands for. That's when you know your message is consistent. That's when you know things are working. Things are working. And people get really frustrated when I say this because they're just like, I'm so sick and tired of saying the same thing, right? Like I can't even tell y'all, man, I know I've said it on here before, but sometimes I get sick and tired of saying, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. It mostly happens whenever I'm batching YouTube videos and I'm batching podcast episodes because I say it like 7 or 8 times in like a 2-hour period. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if I have to say this one more time. But it's something I absolutely believe, but it only happens like whenever you get sick of it as the creator, as the person saying your tagline. That is probably when your audience is just now actually hearing it. Because if you're listening to this podcast for the very first time, you've never heard any of the other episodes, you're just going to hear the message. Like that's it. You're not going to know that that means something around here. You're not going to know that that's something of significance until you hear it again and again and again and again. And now when people say my own tagline back to me, y'all, it's everything. Oh my gosh, it's everything. Whenever someone will say, well, we all have to keep it up because we all start somewhere. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm ugly crying. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. But it's one of those things like no one else would get that. No one else would understand why that is significant, but you do. as a listener, if you've been listening to the show, if you're brand new around here, you're like, okay, now I know. But that is how you create that message. It goes back to marketing and consistency. You have to have all of these pieces. We're not doing a kind of create your own path, create your own journey. All of these things we're talking about are important today. Not just one of them, all of them are important. Okay, so let's just recap real fast. So we've talked about consistency, marketing, messaging. Now we're going to talk about the clear picture. So I know I already said go get Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. Super important that you go read this because his message is, if you confuse, you lose. That's where this having a clear picture really comes from. I've read that book cover to cover multiple times. I have highlights. I have like sticky notes all in it. I have referenced it so many times when I'm doing a launch, when I'm grabbing testimonials for my audience. Like, it is so good because it reminds me that I have to make sure my message is clear. And you want to make sure that your message and your branding paint a clear picture for your audience. Otherwise, they're not going to get it. They're not going to get it. Maybe they like you, maybe they like your message, but they're never going to buy from you. They're never actually going to go on the journey with you because they're really not that invested. They don't understand exactly how you can help them, right? And I will come on here and I will tell y'all and I give value and I do all the things, but I also tell you that there are really cool ways that you can work with me, whether it's through Profit Podcasting, my online course, or joining the Potty People membership, or just grabbing my $37 podcast launch toolkit, or grabbing Start a Binge-Worthy Podcast. Like, I have so many resources for you. And I want you to know that my message across all of those different products that we have at Profit Media is very clear. They're going to help you with a podcast. Not one of those is a recipe for how to, like, I'm just trying to think, like meal plan, meal prep. That wouldn't be a recipe. That would be a meal plan. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't have a lot of weird messages across those. All of those have to do with different stages of podcasting. Remember, going back, start, launch, and market. I just said member, and my husband makes fun of me so bad whenever I say that. Member. I think that's my East Texas coming out today. Member. So we are all about start, launch, and market. That's what all of these products, that is the clear picture that I have. So you also want to make sure that across your platforms, this is actually something we've been working on at Profit Media. We're revising everything across our brand. Like, I'm doing this in real time. If you've noticed in the last few weeks, I totally rebranded my YouTube channel. I have done a few different things on Instagram that I'm really working at getting my branding down. This is an always evolving process. It's not something that you do one day, like, and concentrate on, oh, okay, these are my colors. We're good with our brand. It's going to keep evolving. We're actually in the process right now. We're totally redoing our website, and it's going to be relaunching in April. So yeah, I'm excited about that. I'm a little nervous because we're doing a major overhaul. It's not like, oh, I just changed a few pictures and we're good now. We are totally redoing our website. The reason why is because it no longer feels consistent with where my brand is today. So it's going to be an ever-evolving process, but you have to make sure that that picture is clear, because I want people to land on any of my platforms, whether it's social media, it's a newsletter, it's a podcast, it's a YouTube video, whatever. I want it to be apparent from the very beginning of what I do, who I serve, and if I'm the right fit for them or not immediately. I don't want it to be like, oh, what does this chick do? Does she talk about underwater basket weaving? Is that what's going on? No, I talk about podcasting. It's usually the first words out of my mouth. If you get on a YouTube channel, like, or a YouTube video, you can see, oh, she's like all in on podcasting. Like, she's not talking about email marketing and social media. Like, she is just talking about podcasting. That is intentional. That is very intentional because I want to have that clear picture. Okay, and then the last thing I want to talk about is goals, right? I feel like everything comes back to goals and what you're trying to go after, but what are your brand goals? Do you want to be known for something? Do you want to have this persona? Like, what is the feel? I feel like this is where we're getting into the creative side of it. And I actually had my friend, so shout out Eva Walker. She is a personal stylist, and she actually has this creative eye for color and how to pair things together. And she's helped dress me on multiple occasions, like on like FaceTime. We're talking and I'm sending her pictures of my closet. She helped me shop last year. And I'm like, please help me, because this is where I struggle. It's like the colors and everything. But she had told me in late 2019, she was like, Crystal, the images that you're sharing on Instagram are so dark. Like, as in the background was that really dark. It's like a really, really dark gray color. It's a brand color of mine, but it's really, really dark. And she's like, this just doesn't feel like you. It feels kind of masculine. And she was like, and I know you're not super feminine, like with pinks and lots of like pastel-y kind of colors, but she said, this just feels so dark and you're very light. Like, you have this light energy. And I really took that to heart. And she's not a regular listener of this podcast. Like, I'll have to tell her, oh, by the way, I mentioned you. Or if you know Eva, like, tag her on social media, take a screenshot and be like, Crystal was talking about you. But I think it's important to think about these things. What do you want to exude from your brand? What are some of the feelings, the emotions? Like, do you want someone to see your stuff and say, oh man, that chick is a badass? Or do you want them to see your things and say, man, she's got her stuff together, or she really has the technology down and she knows how to do all these things? I don't have all that. I'm just going to tell you right now. If I don't exude that with my brand, simply because I don't go about bragging about all of my equipment. I do have some really fancy stuff. I will add that. I have definitely upped my game and upgraded and evolved as we've been on this journey, but I don't have all the fancy stuff. Like, I have it, but I don't brag about it, right? You get what I'm saying there? Like, even though I have it, I don't brag about it because I don't want people coming to me and asking me equipment questions all the time. That's really what it comes down to, because I know my equipment. I don't want to deal with everybody else's equipment. Okay. Like, I don't want to be known for that. I want to be known as the podcast coach that helps solo podcasters feel more confident, and that helps entrepreneurs get started with creating their podcast in a way that's going to work for them, their schedule, their time, and really help their business grow in a way that helps them make a bigger impact with their audience. These are the things that I want to be known for. I want to be known as an authority figure in the podcasting space. I want to get more leads and more sales from everything that I'm putting out there. But also, at the end of the day, I want people to know that that's not why I'm here, right? Like, first and foremost, I'm here to serve and I'm here to add value. And I can't just say that one time on a podcast and it means something. I actually have to show up week after week and make sure that that value is established as part of my brand and it is consistent through everything that I put out. This goes back to consistency. This actually just made me think of, if you start putting out messages that contradict each other, that's going against your consistency. So one of my goals, right, at Profit Media, we're sitting here talking about goals. One of mine is to always be consistent. Maybe that sounds like a total like Russian nesting doll type situation. It's like an inception idea of what we're talking about today, but consistency is one of my goals. I want people to see what I'm doing and say, dang, Crystal's consistent and she shows up. I want people to say that about me. So going back to what are people saying about you when you're not in the room? I want them to say, she's consistent. She shows up every single week. Every single time she says she's going to put out a podcast episode, she puts out a podcast episode. And every time she says she's going to show up, she's going to send her newsletter, she's going to do this promotion, she's going to deliver on what she promises, she does it. That's what I want people to say about me. So what do you want people to say about your brand? Right? Go write it down. If you're going to go into Canva and do all the things for your brand board, go write this down. What do you want people to say about you and your brand? I want you to think about all this because these are really, really important, because at the end of the day, If you don't think about these things and you keep just creating content and putting it out there, it's not going to be consistent anyway. So think about them now, whether you're just getting started, whether you've been doing this for a while and branding, marketing, none of that's ever even come across your mind. You need to start thinking about it today. It's the perfect time to start. But that's all I have for you today. So make sure you go check out the show notes at crystalprofit.com/episode 236. You're going to find a lot of resources for branding and marketing. I have lots of videos and podcast episodes, and you want to go check all of those out. And if you are brand new around here, thank you so much for listening. I would love for you to subscribe to the show and take a screenshot and tag me on Instagram and say, oh my gosh, you blew my mind with your branding strategies, and tell me what one takeaway was, right? Like slide into my DMs on Instagram and say, this is the thing that I wish I would have known when I first started my online business or started my podcast, whatever it was for you. Tell me your number one takeaway that you had from today's episode. Again, the show notes are crystalprofit.com/episode 236. And as always, I'm going to say it. Do you want to say it with me? Okay, let's say it together. Keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.